What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with author Parker Adams talking about The Lockbox. This book was really cool. It's like a heist with an expert safecracker, and I super cool the way that he wrote it. It pulls you along the whole way. In this conversation with Parker, I really enjoyed just learning about him, his life, and how he crafts the story, and just learning how authentic he is and how real he is as an author. And it was a really enjoyable conversation. I really look forward to you guys listening to it and checking it out. So without further ado, here is Parker Adams. So today we've got Parker Adams. We're talking about The Lockbox. That book is available now. Parker, thank you so much for joining me today. I never encountered quite a thriller like this where it's like a big old heist and stuff like that. But I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed what you did with Mana, if I'm pronouncing that right, Mana's character. Thanks for taking the time to chat today.
No, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your kind words about the book. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get started, can you give like a little summary of the book so that people can follow along with the conversation if they haven't read it yet?
Sure, Mona Locke is LA's finest safecracker. She's the kind of person that you call if your Oscar night red carpet jewels are locked in your safe and you can't get them out in time. It's the very start of COVID when everyone's confused about what's going on, and she gets called out to a big Malibu mansion out on the cliffs to go retrieve a box from a safe out there. And no sooner does she get out there and get the box open than she gets ambushed and she gets kidnapped and taken to Miami. And she's forced to participate in what could be the heist of the century.
Yeah, you definitely set the tone like from the get-go, and it was really cool I think it was just unique. I've never encountered a character who was like, nope, that was her job. She was a safecracker. And okay, yeah, there are a handful of people where who will definitely find those skills useful for like nefarious things. So
Exactly.
I thought it was interesting. It's super cool. And I want to get into every, like all the research that maybe you had to do and all that stuff. But can you go in maybe your background a little bit and maybe what led up to you developing the lockbox and sharing it with the world?
Sure. I'm on, I guess it's like my third career now. I started out, I was going to be a research scientist. And so I started out as a marine biologist. And I chased sharks around and did stuff like that for a while. Then I went to law school, and I'm still a practicing lawyer to this day. I work at a big firm in San Diego. And then about 20 years ago, I started writing fiction to see if I could get it published on the side. And in 2018, I got my first book published. My first three books are all under my real name, Joseph Reed, and those are about an air marshal. And my third one came out March of 2020, so right around the time of the lockdowns. I was actually at the Left Coast Book Conference when it got shut down in San
Oh.
Diego. Yeah, and but that was like a week before my book was supposed to come out, and no one's flying. And so, what do you do with an air marshal hero when all the planes are grounded? I was sitting at home like everybody else, and I was a big heist movie fan growing up, and so I'm watching the LA freeways be empty, and I'm watching people run around in masks, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, now would be a really good time to commit a really big crime. And that's
Hmm.
how the inspiration for this book came about. And so it's a nod to all the heist movies I grew up with and things like that, but putting my own sort of modern spin on it.
That's fascinating. We're gonna backtrack a little bit. So you chased
Sure.
sharks, and
Yep.
then you're like, oh, let me see like the next big adventure in my life that doesn't involve sea creatures with lots of teeth. I
Right.
don't know. I'm very like I've been scuba diving once, and that was on my
Okay.
honeymoon. It was because of what was the one thing that my new husband wanted to do. That was the
Okay.
one thing that he was looking forward to on that trip. And I was like, I almost chickened out. I almost didn't do it, and I'm glad I did it. But I'm just like, there, we don't even know half of what's down there, like a majority of what's down there. I think I saw a meme that was like, I don't know, I like the ocean, like something like whatever's in there has my respect, but I'm good on the shore. Like I'm good, like on the side. So I
Uh
thought
huh.
that it's like really cool that you just decided to learn. What kind of inspired you to start getting into like marine biology, as you said?
I was a Navy brat. I moved all over the place when I was a
Okay,
kid.
so
And
that explains it.
a little bit. When I was in kindergarten,
Yeah.
I left kindergarten early, and as a going away present, my class gave me a little book on sharks. And so I read that book and I fell in love with sharks. And I said, wow, that's what I want to do. And so I went to every aquarium I could, and I watched every National Geographic special I could. And Jaws was like our family Christmas movie. Like a lot of people watch, like It's a Wonderful Life or something. We watch Jaws. And so I just grew up, that's what I wanted to do. And so went to college for that and started grad school for that. And yeah, that's how all that came about.
Okay, that's so cool. And then lawyer,
Yeah.
and you're still practicing lawyer. What do you specialize in then? If you could talk about it. I don't want to get you in
Yeah,
trouble.
no, it's fine. I do high tech law, so I do patents and trademarks and copyrights and things like that. And I'm a litigator, so I'm the kind of lawyer who's in court arguing in front of juries and judges and stuff like that.
Okay. That's super wow. Okay. So I'm like trying to see like the connection here. So I'm glad that that's so fascinating that you were just like making it happen. Anything where like your career, professional ambitions tugged you towards, were any of those like the skills in those other careers, were they useful? Did anything transfer over when you started like writing stories?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Writing was always the kind of thing that I did in my job, but it wasn't my job, if that makes sense. Really thought, oh, I'm going to be a writer. I was like, oh, I'm a good writer, so I can use that in science and write articles, and I can use that in law and be a lawyer. Yeah, and then when it came to to becoming a fiction writer, yeah, there's a lot of skills that are transferable. And there's a lot of research. Lawyers, I think, tend to do well as writers because we're used to writing pretty quickly on deadline, things like that. I always say people ask like how lawyer and writer overlap. As a litigator, and people if people have watched Law and Order on TV or lawyer movies or whatever, litigation is all about going out and getting little pieces of evidence, right? Like and putting and then giving them to the judge or the jury to tell a story. Fiction writing is the same thing, just in reverse. I start with what the picture is, and then I get to take a hammer and I smash it into tiny little pieces, and then I get to scatter those through the book and have the detective or whoever find them and the reader find them and then work their way to the end. So it's the same process, just in reverse.
That's really cool. I never, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to look at it because that makes so much sense. Yeah, reversing that process. I like that. I've never encountered that before because, yeah, I've spoken to authors who writing books is not their full-time job. Often it's what they do on the side, but it's fascinating to see how the different backgrounds and different careers or existing careers like transfer over to that. And I think that's such a really cool way to put it in terms of doing investigative work along those lines and then turning that around for when you're crafting this type of project. I think that's, yeah, that was a good way to put it. That's so cool. And then piggybacking off of that with the research, because there's a lot of details about like safes and the processes and the history of manufacturers and top of the line, I don't know, whatever you call them, this top of the line like machinery, if you will, like the
Yeah.
top of the line safe. And I didn't know that there was a impossible to crack safe out there with three different modes of access points in order to get in. I had no idea that existed, but it was really cool to read about it. So I definitely want to go into that. I think that's one of the things that were probably more unique about this story. So, like, I want to explore your research
Mm-hmm.
and did you approach it? You got into how you approach it, just piggybacking off of that, because I imagine you might have fallen down a couple rabbit holes while you were trying to develop the story.
Yeah, all my books, because I'm a techno lawyer, right? All my books kind of have some element of technology in them. Like
Sure.
one of my books is about drones. One of my books is about like the security stuff at an airport. And so for this one, I knew for Mana to be an expert in safes, I really needed to get in and get my hands dirty and figure all that stuff out. That's what I do in my day job too. I have to get inside my clients' products or the products in the case and figure
Sure.
out how they
Yeah.
work. And so I'm used to doing that. This one was a little bit different because it was all during COVID, and so I couldn't go anywhere. My options for talking to people were much fewer than I'd been used to. So there's a lot of online stuff, but the research is the same. It's okay, how does a basic lock work? And then you start working your way up. And the you were talking earlier about there just being a few top safecrackers in the world, and that's true. There's actually a safe cracking contest every year. And I read about that and dug into that and figured out who the big people were and read the profiles on them and sort of their stories and stuff. And so that definitely played into the book. The contest, I wrote the contest into the book.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think that's so fascinating because I imagine once you lift the lid up a little bit, there's so much more to be learned that you might not have expected, like once you started. Because I thought Mana's character was really interesting in that regard because she's like trying to lay low, right? Like she's not
Right.
trying to be out there. She's not trying to compete for glory or anything like that or prove anything. She's just out there, yeah, like lying low, doing her job and keep, because she's like the place that she lives at, the house she lives at, is a little isolated too. And then as we go through the stories, readers, we slowly understand why that's how she prefers things. It's because she's got a history that she doesn't want to be brought attention to herself because of that. And so I thought that was really interesting, and I want to explore how you developed her character. And also I was just a little curious like how it is tapping into the mindset and putting yourself in a character who's maybe like a totally different background, but then also different age, different gender, different like all that stuff. I imagine because you got to get in that character's head. I want you to talk about how you were able to manage that.
Yeah, no, it's a very hard thing, and that's one of the things that's great about writing, frankly, is you get to put yourself in other people's heads and try and figure out what makes them tick. At a base level, I think there's a lot of things that, whether you're a man or a woman or where you come from, there's a lot of things that are just basic to us being human, and I think we can all relate to those things. And I think a lot of the best books tap into those emotions and things. And then I live in a house full of women. I have a wonderful wife and two daughters, and so I knew it was incumbent on me that writing a female main character to get that right. And I had a ton of all my readers were female, and I
Okay.
wanted to make sure that I wasn't inadvertently tripping over something. I'm a military kid. I have a lot of friends from the military, and so I was able to pull out those kinds of details from contacts and things like that. And so you get a little piece from over here and a little piece from over there, and you put it together in a package, and it starts to speak to you about, okay, if this person had this background and this experience, what are they going to do? And that's a fun part of plotting out the book, is the what would they do next? And a lot of that is motivated by who they are and what they've done and what they've seen and things like that. And if, for example, in this book, she's been kidnapped, and so one of the things she really wants to do is escape. And she, being a former military person, and she's a very physical character. She's used to working with her hands, and she's a very strong, physically strong woman. She goes about trying to escape in ways that are totally different than I would as an older man. But you put yourself in her shoes and you ask yourself, okay, if I had all those abilities and all those experiences,
Mm-hmm.
what would I do?
Because you
And so you
did
go from
make
there.
her kind of like really tall too, didn't you?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
I was thinking about that too, and I had to remind myself. I was like, oh no, she's tall. So yeah, obviously
Yeah.
she would be have some of those skills would come easily to her just because of her like her reach and all that. I don't know, because I'm like 5'3" on a good day, so that's why like when I meet like characters, it's like, oh wait, is that possible? No, yeah, they're like 5'8". It probably is. I'm like,
Yeah.
how easily would some of these things be to accomplish? Yeah.
I'm like 5'8", 5'9", but my older daughter is 5'10", and she plays volleyball,
Okay.
and so she is. I've been surrounded, following her around as a volleyball dad. I've been surrounded by very tall women, so yeah,
Yeah,
that doesn't
I was
change
gonna
anything.
say, yeah, if you got a daughter, any child in volleyball, a lot of those are very tall athletes, very tall.
Yes.
I guess maybe a lot of athletes tend to be on the taller side, but volleyball for sure, because they gotta reach in the long span and they gotta be able to top the net and they gotta
Yeah.
be taller than everyone else too, like on the court and all that. So, no, I that makes a lot of sense. How you like I would feel like maybe a challenge for you in a future story would be like to write a short character and be like, okay, what okay, how is this? How am I gonna do this? Yeah, though that's cool. I really, like I said, I liked Mana as a character because she was like, I don't know. I've heard this term before. It's like a soft strength. Like she's like alert. Like you can tell like there's more than meets the eye. Even though I imagine as a tall person she commands the space almost like without even trying. People notice her. She's there. But I when I was just getting to know her as a reader, I could sense that she had those instincts. She had those skills, survival. But then she also has Evan, her son.
Hmm.
And so that just adds a whole new level, like a whole new layer of like survival and looking for ways to escape, seeing what she can manipulate, who she can manipulate, because it's just not her. And also the escape routes too. She's, if I can make this, like, how is my, because he's 4 or something. She's,
Yeah.
or 6 or something like that. I
He's
think, I
5.
forget.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right
okay.
there.
I
Yeah.
was almost there. I was getting there. So yeah, like, he's a small child. So there's so many things to consider. I have 2 little boys, like 3 and 6. And so I was able to, that resonated with me. Like, I could,
Oh,
yeah, have that understanding of, yeah, I don't even know what to do. And I feel I understood that whole extra layer. Just like it does something to the psyche, like to the context of it, to the context of the challenge anyway. But yeah, because like her personality, she wasn't really taking any bullshit, but she wasn't like necessarily outspoken. She was trying to be calculated, and if that's the right word, but like she was planning, and she was being careful about what she was noticing and who was noticing what she was noticing. And I enjoy the little girl power that you put in there too, like,
good.
for sure. Like, it's just
Good. I'm glad.
personally, but I imagine you couldn't help but do it, because like you said, if your beta readers are female, to make sure that you're like being fair and objective to like your character development, and also not be insulting, not holding her hand, but also being realistic about it. I imagine it's like a little fine line you're teetering on. Because I've spoken to other authors before, male authors, who how they write women, and
Mm.
it's similar. They're like, I think one, oh my God, what was his name? I have my bookshelf back here. I feel bad because I've interviewed him twice and I really like him. Oh, James Byrne, because he's also
Okay.
another pen name for his previous works. But yeah, he was writing. We talk about that, and he was saying, I there have been times where my wife has said a woman would never do this,
Nope.
and I'm like, I'm glad that you have that. And then he also, I think his mom reads his books, and he's did a quip of, yeah, that's why I don't have any like deep sex scenes in my books, because I know my mom's gonna read them. So like things like that, but I would say, yeah, like, as a male author, you have to be mindful of those things. And I think that when you say all your beta readers are women, that's just what that reminded me as, is where I think it was something as simple as, oh, like, she took a shower and weighed herself, and his wife was like, a woman would never do that. Like, a woman would never weigh herself after taking a shower, or after, I don't know, like after a meal, something like that. No, this
Okay.
isn't. It's a simple little action just to further the story, further the character's day along. But some things like that, it does make a difference for sure. So yeah, that's what that reminded me of. And I thought that was like really cool how you just, I guess there's appreciation to it, where you have to like, it's like your little baby, you got to pass your baby on to someone else and take their constructive criticism, and make sure that you just have to just accept it. And because chances are, if they're all saying one thing, then maybe there's something there, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah. And as a man writing a female main character, I think if you're doing it, I think you need to be conscious of the fact that, yeah, you may miss details like that seem small or seem simple, but really weigh on the realism of the character and whether readers can buy that this character is for real. And yeah, a lot of characters in thriller fiction and crime fiction are either sort of superhuman, and I didn't want Mana to be that. They're super sexy, and I didn't want Mana to be that. I wanted her to be relatable and real, and she's got some real strengths and some real things going for her, and she's got some real weaknesses too. And
Mm.
I wanted her to be a well-rounded, realistic person, and hopefully I did that.
Yeah, I think you did, at least from my perspective, from what I remember anyway. Because I'm like, I don't know, I've probably read 8 books since I finished yours. So I just want to, yeah, I just think that's one thing I remembered about her, was just, yeah, for me at least, she was a unique character, and her whole objective, like what the whole thing she had to do, that it was normal. And it was really cool to see how I like how you said you didn't want her to be like the typical suspense thriller character, because that kind of comes through, because I got the inkling that she didn't, when she had to put certain outfits on, like, she wasn't comfortable with her own sexuality. Like, she wasn't comfortable with using her body to that advantage, like, as a part of the mission.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting what you just said, because it reflected in that, like, where she was just, I'm here, I'm gonna do what I need to do so that we can walk out of here alive. And then she's like looking at these outfits, she's, what is that?
Yeah,
So
it's one of those
yeah.
things, like watching my wife and watching my daughters and stuff. Women, men too, but like women have feelings about their looks and their bodies and how their bodies, occupy space. My daughter, for example, she's a volleyball player and she's tall. And when she's with her team, all surrounded by tall women, she stands up straight and she's very proud of that. But But when she's in her prom pictures with a bunch of men, she may stand slightly differently. And I notice that because I'm her dad, but it's just on a human level, right? You want to imbue your characters with that kind of complexity.
That's amazing. I think that's so wonderful that as a dad, as a father, you notice that. Like you notice how she carries herself depending on the environment. And I think it's obviously she's probably a rock star volleyball player. So of course she's just gonna be like, "Yep, I'm here. I'm turning myself. I'm in the zone. Let's do this." Versus a social function where she's out of her element. Or I don't know, school dances they happen what like 2, 3 times a year. So she's probably just focused on her athletic performance and staying tip top shape or whatever versus, oh, this is like a new environment and I have to look nice and oh, what is everybody else wearing and am I matching and am I going to have a good time and all that stuff because I'm like I think that's so cool. I think that's so interesting and it's so true and I love that for the father side of you. I love that you notice that and that you
Thank
pay
you.
attention to that. That's so awesome. So I'm thinking like I don't know, prob for me. I don't care who knows how old I am. It was like 20 years ago, and I'm even thinking for me it wasn't like I don't know. Maybe I just because I wasn't in sports. So I'm trying to think of like my own experiences. And I think it's just taken me a while to become comfortable like with the person I am. But I just remember, yeah, it's just awkward no matter what. Just going through that
Sure,
whole
sure.
high school experience. It's a rite of passage. You're going to be awkward and then you're going to look back and be like, oh my God. Like I thought I was the coolest shit. And then you look back and you're like, oh God, look at who's this punk.
Can't remember where I got the advice from, but one of the things about writing complex characters is just recognizing that they occupy different roles with different people. You
Absolutely.
act differently with your mom than you do with your own children, than you do with the person down the hall that you can't stand, right? Trying to keep track of all that and trying to imbue your characters with that kind of complexity and asking, okay, like you said earlier, what can she get away with in this position when she's trying to get away or she's dealing with someone who's kidnapped her and she's worried about her son versus how is she going to be with him when he's misbehaving or stressed out? How is she going to be when she's forced to put on a pretty party dress? Those kinds of things, it's just asking yourself about the person and the situation and realizing that, yeah, they could be completely, like you said, proud of themselves in one arena, but shy and of it in a different arena.
Yeah, I think that's really smart because I think that's how Mana is a little bit more relatable in that sense, just because not only you didn't want to like give her that quintessential cookie cutter personality or skill set, but I think just the fact that you made her responsible for a young life and I think that was also really I bet that was really challenging too because like I said I'm two small boys and so I'm like with I felt like I bet she would have probably been a little bit easier to outmaneuver her situation had she not had to worry about him. And so I'm guessing that was like obviously very intentional. Like you had to raise the stakes a little bit for her.
Sure.
But yeah, I felt it just go back into that like soft strength. Like you could tell she's a force to be reckoned with, but she still had the compassion and she was still able to like during a crisis, your children will pick up like your energy. And if they don't like if they're looking to their grown-ups to like follow their lead. Is this a dangerous situation? What and or unfamiliar situation, like how looking into the parent to lead. And so I thought that was like very clever how it was a good way for the readers to understand like the full scope of who she is and
Thank you.
not just like in her background too, obviously, but because you sprinkled her background, her flashbacks here and there. But yeah, I thought it was like a really smart, like really cool thing. And as a reader, I enjoyed it. It was like a new level. I felt like that story would have been compelling even if you didn't hadn't thrown a child's life in danger at that
Uh huh.
point. But just, it definitely like it upped the stakes for sure, for sure. You got, like you said, you got couple published works out there. Are they also suspense or like action or
Yeah,
yeah.
all my books are similar in that I would call them action adventure. Usually they're shelved with thrillers, and that's how I got my start was at Thriller Fest. They're more thrillers than mysteries. But yeah, there's
Okay.
always a bunch of action. There's always chases and fights and things like
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah, I was just wondering what draws you to that genre or maybe the subgenres of it. Because I imagine, obviously, there's a bunch of genres out there, but yeah, I just want to explore because I know authors, they tend to write what they enjoy. So I just want to pick your brain and see like what draws you to writing those types of stories.
yeah, It's definitely what I grew up reading. I grew up reading a mix of thrillers and sci-fi. And so, like on the thriller side, it was Tom Clancy or Michael Crichton was a big one because he had a lot of technology in his books. Same thing with Clancy, like Hunt for Red October. And so there is, I enjoy a good summer movie. I enjoy the escape of it. I enjoy getting sucked into the action of it and being transported away. And I like the sort of the visceral excitement of when you're reading about a good fight or you're reading about a good chase or something like that. It gets your heart pounding and it makes the hair stand up on your arms and stuff. And so to be able to write that, I'm writing things that I would hope people would like to read just like I would like to read them. And so yeah, that's really what it's about. It's how can I make the ticking clock in the background tick faster? How can I make you turn the page? How can I make you stay up late because you want to put the book down, but just one more chapter, that kind of thing. Because those, frankly, were the books I always liked reading.
Yeah, those were the books that kept you one more chapter.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know, sometimes it's just a story of my life where I'm like, okay, before I know it, no, I should go to bed. Just don't. So I just read like any, obviously, but I just read when I get approached for this kind of stuff, I read like a lot of different genres. But right now, what's had a hold on me is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. And
hmm
so I was like, okay, all the hype, I'm like, I got to get into it. And I was asking my friend, I was like, okay, which series should I start with? And she told me to start with Throne of Glass as like she's no, that's everybody's all about ACOTAR, but she's people have no taste. Just start with Throne of Glass. And I got sucked in. I'm like almost done with the series. And I'm like, once you find that sweet spot as the author of where you can just hook readers where they're just gonna, that's all they're gonna do for 8 hours is
yep,
just to read.
yep.
I
And
feel like that's so hard to accomplish, right?
when and I'm old enough to remember too, like the when books weren't like immediately available, and you'd finish one and you'd be like dying to go to the bookstore, right, to get the next one and see what happened next, and or if it wasn't out yet, like how do I wait a year to figure
Oh
out
God.
what's going to happen next? I think the best books are the ones where you're sad when they're over and you're dying for the next one because you want to know what else happens, with those characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like, yeah, hopping off of that, I enjoyed like the secondary characters, King and Queen and
Right.
Jack, and I don't
Right.
know, even like the client Huang.
Mm-hmm.
Was that his name,
Yep.
Huang? Yeah. I don't know. I've learned to like bad characters too. Oh, he's interesting. What's his deal?
Right.
What he's like, he is just unrelenting. He's just doesn't.
Yep.
This is gonna be done, and I'm gonna make sure that you get it done. And don't you try to cross me. Blah blah blah. He's 3 steps ahead of everyone, and that's a very interesting character. But obviously I liked Queen, but I also liked King and Jack, even though you didn't really know what you fed readers just enough. And then because obviously we're Mona, right? Or Mana, we're with her, and so it's the readers are finding out things with her. And so I thought that was really cool. But yeah, I liked the secondary characters too. Obviously, like she's got to work with these people that she doesn't even know, and then she like the more she learns about them and things like that, in addition to trying to figure out if getting to know them could be to her advantage and things like that. But yeah, I imagine it's tricky, like figuring out what those types of personalities will be and how they're gonna what roles they're gonna play.
Yeah, no, I going into any heist story, right? You have to have a crew, and the crew, each member of the crew has to do something different because that's why they're there.
Hmm.
And so figuring out what those roles were and how everyone was going to get along or not get along was important. And one of the things I think that hopefully keeps the stakes high is you, the reader, like Mana, are trying to figure out who she can trust, and everybody's out for their own motive, and so she goes through various phases of trusting or distrusting different characters, and sometimes she makes the right choices, and sometimes she makes the wrong choices, and hopefully there's payouts to all that stuff. But yeah, that was trying to the structure of this book is a little challenging because the middle of the book you have to do a lot. You have to introduce a lot of people and introduce what they're going to do, and that's a lot of feeding stuff to the reader, and you want to keep it interesting and keep it exciting, and some of the interpersonal dynamics are important to keep the fireworks going, and also trying to keep the reader guessing and moving through the plot.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think, yeah, I bet that was like super fun. Well, okay, that'll segue into my next
Sure.
question because you did talk about challenging things to write. So I like to ask authors this. Were the most challenging parts to write versus the most enjoyable parts to write?
Yeah, book really the first act and the third act, the Mana getting set up and kidnapped, and then the actual heist itself. Those were the most fun parts to write and the easiest parts in a lot of ways. The middle act was harder just because you know that the reader's got a clock in their head, right? And they're like, okay, well, let's get to the heist, right? Like you can't wait too long, and you don't want things to drag, but you have to give the reader a certain amount of information for things to pay off
Mm-hmm.
too. And so we spent a lot of time really editing. You always edit every single word in a book, but really in that middle, every single word, it was like, do we really need this, or can we cut it to try and get the middle as lean as possible to try and keep it moving? Because we knew that was, if there was a risk of losing somebody, it was there, but we didn't want to do that, obviously, and so that was probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I could see that because exactly like you said, like you want to respect the reader's time and attention, but you also have to like find a way to enter feed the information and also make it engaging, maintain that attention span. So I totally
Right.
appreciate that struggle. I totally appreciate. I know it's like this is one of the harder things, and the fact that you had editors like there was an editing process where you paying close attention to that because you knew like you anticipated that being, the way to just keep readers engaged. I totally appreciate that struggle for sure. It's just I don't know, it's just interesting that's like when I talk to authors like how much of, you're not alone. Like a lot of you are in the same boat figuring it out and like I said cherishing like your baby and trying to accept the constructive criticism, just trusting the process and all that stuff just to make sure that it takes the time that it takes the work that it takes for it to be worthy of you, that you feel good about it as the author, but then you feel confident letting the fledging fly, like kicking the fledging off the nest and just seeing how it performs in the world. Yeah. So just a few more questions here
Sure.
before we wrap up. All right, I'm gonna throw this at you. What advice do you have for Mana?
For Mana, I don't want to give away anything about the end of the book. So
I know,
I
like try to be
won't,
spoiler free.
yes, I can't give too much away about like how, where she is when the book ends. But I will say that she should watch out because even if she gets through this, there might be other ramifications and other adventures related to this that might happen.
Okay. I have more questions after that. You're making me ask more questions instead of giving my answers. But no, I know I ask authors that, and they're like, if they listened to my advice at the beginning of the book, there would be no book.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
like, at what point in the story am I giving this advice, right?
Yep.
So, no, that's why I like to give authors a hard time, and be like, seeing where they go, see where you guys go with it. So you mentioned this earlier, what you're hoping like what you hope that readers do. Like what at the end of the day, like what do you
Mm-hmm.
hope readers get out of the lockbox?
I mean, I hope it's a story that, obviously that entertains. Um, I hope it's a story that makes people think about their relationships with their children and whatever sort of parental figures are in their lives. Mana has a mentor in this book, a teacher of hers that's really important to her and sets her on the good path that she's on, because her parents really aren't all that helpful for a variety of reasons. And I think a lot of the emotional stuff in the book is about how we care about people and how we bond with each other. She's got a son now, and she has to, even though she didn't have great parents herself, she has to figure out how to do that and what that means. And hopefully, she does that by the end of the book. And if that helps people figure out their own relationships a little better, then that's great.
Yeah, I like that because we didn't even tap into that. We're like exploring the parent-child relationships and how her own upbringing and her background translated into her current situation. Because There's, yeah, obviously all of that, her upbringing or her parentage definitely, it's definitely a part of who she is and the path that she goes on. So, yeah, I was like, I don't want to spell everything out for listeners or readers because I definitely think that some little bits and pieces like that they learned on their own are just add that to that entertainment, that excitement of this of reading a book because I'm just being thrown back, thrown of glass. I'm like, I've spoiled myself in a bunch of stuff inadvertently because I'm just scrolling Instagram and like reading things before realizing, wait, I'm not at that book yet. So I appreciate the fact of just the certain details that like it's just you're diving a little bit deeper and it's like unpacking those layers on in addition to the big picture, the big storyline. Yeah, and just I don't know, I'm a big sucker for not just for suspense, but in like character growth in general and just seeing how the authors when they create characters in their head, I'm like I think it's so interesting how they craft that path, that story arc or that development arc for characters. And I appreciate it. So that's why I thought it is just strange. Okay, you created a person in your head and you're going to create this whole experience for them in your head and you have to also deliver it in a way that like we said, like respects the reader's time and attention and keeps them engaged and keeps them entertained. Yeah, it's a whole thing. So that's why it's so cool to pick authors' brains and just see who's got one process versus another and people like you who are like on your third career and how that transfers over like to doing something like this. I think it's so cool.
Think it was a very sort of anxious time, I think, for all of us, right? You don't know what's going on. You don't know who you can believe. You don't know what's going on in the world and what's going to happen. And I think a lot of those emotions are baked into this book. COVID kind of hangs in the background like a setting. It's a time period, and so it's why this
Yeah.
particular heist can happen, but it's not really a big point of the book. But those emotions that I was going through and that I think everyone was going through, it definitely come out, I think, in the book. And one of the things I think we all struggled with during that time was like, how do we care about each other? How do we take care
Yeah.
of each other? And Mana's struggling with that. How does she take care of her son? How does she take care of the other people in her life? Who can she trust to have her back? And so in those ways, I think we use fiction to get out the stuff that we're going through or that we're experiencing. And this is definitely a COVID era book in the sense of all of those emotions are baked in.
Yeah. Like a way to connect with your readers too, just because I don't know. I always use the joke as yeah, a lot of authors they'll say when I ask about oh like how your process of developing the story or like how did this experience differ from your previous books and they say oh this was a COVID book and that's all they that's all they have to say. It's just something like I wrote this during the pandemic. What else are you gonna do other than learn how to make bread from scratch? It's just I remember there were so many the internet was just everyone's so that was like our continual struggle even though like how I find it remarkable and fascinating how much some of the argument was so black and white like how you said people didn't know who to believe people didn't know who to trust we didn't know like the information that was out there and everyone's going to have their opinions and we live in an age where it could spread so easily no matter what and that I think it was just a collective experience like globally I was because some I had some friends who it was driving them nuts they hated it and for me I was just like I the only thing I struggled with was because I had my oldest, he was in preschool at the time, and they had to do. We're like, okay, is he gonna still be in preschool? What are they gonna how are they gonna handle it? And it was adorable but sad to see just a line of 3-year-olds with little kitty masks on and lining up with their backpacks and like this is
Hmm.
their first but they didn't think anything of it like my son and his classmates at the time they didn't think anything of it and I was also during March 2020 I found out I was pregnant with my second so
Oh,
I was just like maybe I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything like if everything's shut down and being canceled anyway I was like I maybe this is an okay time to be like not exposed to people and just like not participating in things and but I remember I did get laid off though and that sucked because I was
oh
like
my God.
9 weeks pregnant when I got laid off from my job yeah I found another job like 2 weeks later but it was really tricky to like how do I approach that do I depend on the government assistance that was happening at the time until I give birth and then however long it was going to happen or do I like try to get a job like right now and then in 6 months I maybe am okay to go like on a month or two leave it was really tricky and plus it was like 9 weeks you're not necessarily telling people yet
Right.
and so I was like I was just so emotional and I couldn't even get drunk or anything to cope. I was like, I think my coping was like pizza and ice cream because I was just like, I don't know what to do with myself. It was just, yeah, it was a moment for me. But I found another job pretty quickly. But then a month into it, I was going to start showing soon, especially because I guess with the second born, you start showing sooner. And so I was like, oh shit, like, all right, I got to have this conversation and I got to be like, I plan on coming back. And I'm not just gonna have my kid and leave. I like working. I like this part of my life. It was just, yeah, it was very challenging. So it was just like like I said, like going back to the whole point. That was when I talk to authors, it's like the same thing. And I also felt bad for the like the date like who's author like authors who it's their debut and they had a debut during the pandemic and meet and greets and author signings and stuff like that where they just weren't stuff that they rely on a lot like to sell their books and stuff or just to get their name out there. I felt for those authors who were like this should be like an exciting time and it's just business is not usual and then
Right.
everybody has to get creative and how they're going to do that. So no, I thought it was, yeah, I thought that COVID plot point was like interesting because again coming back to her worrying about her son where
Hmm.
I just remember there was a part where she's freaking out that he was making contact and she was like I didn't make him wash his hands and so she freaked out about that and it was like
Right.
that's such a simple thing in this very like dangerous, potentially dangerous predicament that she's in. But it's still, oh, is he gonna get a virus or that we don't know anything about that was potentially be really harmful long term? Like, I yeah, so I feel like no matter what, like any author that kind of like mentions COVID, it's just I feel like I totally understand that now, and I feel like any other authors you talk to are gonna be like, yeah,
Hmm.
like the same, just yep. Here was my pandemic book. Here was my pandemic project. Like whatever. Okay, Parker Adams, what's next for you? This is also coming back to you struggle. I feel like you were struggling to answer that other question with the advice.
Yeah.
Are you working on anything that you could talk about?
Yeah. And so I have a few pitches into them about that. And that's a bit of what I was alluding to earlier. Also, about 40,000 words into a new book. That would be something completely different because you never know where all this is going to go. So we'll see what comes of that. That would be another action adventure, but a little more espionage, spy kind of stuff. And most novels are 80 to 90,000 words. So I'm roughly halfway through that. Yeah, plenty of things in the fire, and we'll see what pops out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I would just be interested to see what else you throw Mana into. Like, how is she gonna handle this? And then how you alluded to, there might be some things that she's not quite done with. And I could see her being like, oh, for fuck's sake. I could just see her being like, what? Are you kidding me? But like silently, because she doesn't always want to let people know how she's
Right.
reacting. Like,
Yep.
I'm
Exactly.
like, I'm already anticipating it. I'm already anticipating it. But that's awesome. So, Parker Adams, the Lockbox, that's available now. Where can people find you, like online and on social media?
Sure. My website is probably the easiest place to find me. That's Joseph Reed Books, JosepHreid Books.com. Or you can get there, it's the same place, but you can get there by ParkerAdamsBooks.com. I'm Joseph Reed Books and Parker Adams Books on Instagram, although I mostly use the Joseph Reed Books tag. And then same thing on Facebook. It's Joseph Reed Books 1 on Facebook. And so, yeah, they can find me there. I have a monthly newsletter that comes out that they can sign up through my website.
Perfect. The Lockbox, I do recommend it for people who like, yeah, like action suspense and something a little different. So Parker Adams, The Lockbox, that's available now. Thank you so much. Like I said, this was I thought really cool opportunity to read this book and to meet Mana as a character and everything you threw at her. And if and when you have more Mana in your life, feel free to come back and we can chat some more.
That'd be great. I'd love it. Thank you so much for having me.
And there you go. That was Parker Adams talking about The Lockbox. That book is available now. I highly recommend it. It was, especially if you like suspense and new twists on the suspense genre, I definitely recommend that for you. Check out the show notes for where you can find Parker on all his websites and social media handles, all that good stuff, where you can buy the book, check out his other works, and while you're browsing social media, please do go ahead and check out Cantina Book Club. It really would help me out, along with just listening, as you always are, and liking and following and all that good stuff. So, as always, thank you guys so much for listening.